YouTube, you may have heard rumors and buzzing that the auction house has been changed in Idle Heroes. One small adjustment has a lot of people panicking. It's simple. If you sell a hero on the auction house, you no longer get Starry Gems. Instead, you get Prism Starry Gems, which you then have to convert into your Starry Gems. This doesn't sound like that much of a deal on face value, but has strong implications for the game. First of all, if you're a free-to-play player that pulls an A tier hero or an S tier hero and you sell that copy, you will not have Starry Gems on the account for doing so. The reason that's an issue is if you did have Starry Gems, what you could then go ahead and do is buy a different A tier if you wanted. Also, you can go and look at C tiers, have a look at the price that they're selling for, specifically looking at the buyout price, and you can actually buy C tiers relatively cheap. You can see I can get a C tier right now for 61 Starry Gems. I can then destroy that for 150, which is nearly triple the value. That's not possible if you have Prism Starry Gems that are tied up because your conversion rate is really low. And the reason you may want to do this, where you get triple the number of contract Starry Gems, is so that when it comes to value packages from events, you can pick those up using those contract Starry Gems rather than paying with Prism Starry Gems. Because paying with Prism Starry Gems would be really bad, because you can instead buy copies and destroy them and end up with way more gems by doing that. And this is a trick that people have been doing for a long time. If you're a free-to-play player with a low conversion rate who gets an S-tier hero and wants to do that with their Starry Gems, having prisms is going to make that difficult, which is why there are some people who are upset. But bear in mind, the number of free-to-play players who find themselves in that situation is extremely slim. And the number of free-to-play players that are getting A tiers or higher is weighting now more towards people who have bound copies, because when free-to-play players have an increased chance to get an A tier, that is normally from an item that is bound, whether it's a bound B- stone or the 10 awakens during the Superior Awaken events, where all the copies you pull are bound. So what's likely is you're not even able to sell the A- to S tier heroes that you could pull. So just bear that in mind. But in the rare instance where a free-to-play player does get a high Awaken hero that can be sold, they now get Prism Starry Gems instead of Starry Gems. The other people that are going to be affected by this are going to be people who have already A tier heroes on their account who may want to change those heroes. I don't have any A tiers on this, but let's say I had an A tier Vulcan, but I decided I don't want to use Vulcan anymore. I want to get myself, let's say, a Mockman. If I wanted to make that transition into a Mockman account by selling my Vulcan and buying a Mockman, that is now going to be much harder for me, because I will have to sell the Vulcan, get Prism Starry Gems, and then convert those Prism Starry Gems to Starry Gems before I can go ahead and make the purchase of the Mockman I would want as an A tier. Fortunately though, DHGames have significantly increased the credit rating on accounts. This is a VIP 0 account. It is as far as Chapter 4 in the Void campaign and has made quite a bit of progress. As a result, my conversion rating is 3200 to reflect that. In fact, I even have a perfect smash in the Realms Gate at level 140. So from a progress standpoint, this account is doing very well. And to reflect that, my conversion rate is higher. So one of the easier ways to fix this problem is just increase your conversion rate. However, if you were selling an S tier hero for hundreds of thousands of Starry Gems, even a conversion rate of 3200 is going to take quite some time to get all of those Starry Gems back. But I would then counter-argue, even if it would take me 3 months to get all of the Starry Gems converted, I'm not going to be able to spend them fast enough, right? 3200 Starry Gems converted a day is a lot. So I would argue it's not too much of a big deal for the average player. The final people that are negatively affected by this, though, are auction house flippers. People who are free to play, or budget players, who actually try to increase their Starry Gem total by buying hero copies for cheap and selling them for more than they bought them for. This is often done with B tiers. Maybe you find a really good B tier and you can grab it and then try and sell it to another player, or oftentimes you can even do this with A minuses. I know myself, I've managed to do this. I know a lot of my friends as well have, where they just see an A minus hero that's just a little too good to be true and they think, yeah, I could sell that for more than this. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes there's like a quiet moment in the middle of a really weird week in Idle Heroes, and someone's just desperately trying to sell a Williams copy, and you might just go, you know what, I might be able to pick up this Williams and sell it for a profit if I persevere. Right now, Williams is a dead expensive, so that's probably not very likely, but there are worlds where you can pick up heroes for relatively cheap, and that's a good thing, and then you can sell them for a profit in the future when the market maybe increases in price because there's just not a lot of heroes on the market at that particular moment, so you have a much better selling position. And we see people do that all the time. However, if you're doing that now, you're likely not going to be able to get all of your Starry Gems straight away by selling your hero copies. But assuming you're an established player, you'll still be able to convert them. It will just take you a little bit of time. So that's flipping hero copies. It's probably not going to affect those people too much. It'll just slow down their flipping ability because they will have to convert the Starry Gems they acquire. And if their conversion rate is very low, it is going to negatively impact them. But also, most people aren't Starry Gem flippers and sellers like that. So the majority of people don't sell heroes very much. In fact, if you are selling a hero, the time it takes to convert back to Starry Gems isn't going to hurt you too much. However, there is a group of people who are negatively affected by this update, and it's people who are Starry Gem farmers. People who are selling hero copies constantly to acquire a large amount of Starry Gems on their account, and then they'll transfer them to big accounts and then sell them on to people using the black market. And that's our next talking point. People who are farming lots and lots and lots of copies we'll end up with a massive stack of Prism Starry Gems instead of Starry Gems. And there's one thing about farmer accounts, they have not made very much progress in the game for how old they are, and that instantly flags them to have a low conversion rate, which means it's difficult for those accounts now to gain Starry Gems. That then will cause an impact which is twofold. Either these accounts are going to be able to acquire Starry Gems slower, and therefore people that do purchase Starry Gems from other players will feel that impact by an increase in price on the black market, or you're going to find that people who do farm stop farming. And if that's the case, you'll find that a lot of the time when we're able to buy really cheap C tiers, like I showed you before, you can get them for as cheap as around 60 Starry Gems, well, that might change. We might see the price of C tiers increase, which means when we do the trick of buying C tiers and destroying them for more contract Starry Gems than we paid for, then that might be more difficult, and we might not see as much of a return by doing that, which is something we've seen before in the past. We've seen these go up to almost exactly conversion value. I mean, there was a time when I wouldn't be surprised to buy a C tier for 125, and I used to think that was a good deal back in the day. Now it's as low as 60, sometimes even lower than that if you're buying off bidding, and you'll find frequently that this is a really, really effective way to get a lot of contract Starry Gems. If farmers stop farming and they stop selling copies really cheaply, you will then have a negative impact, which means we won't be able to get as good of a conversion. And that's not a great thing if you are looking to turn Starry Gems into contract Starry Gems. Now, even though you may find the bottom level of heroes increase in price, I expect the higher end heroes to decrease. Because if people aren't selling and flipping as much, and if people don't have access to as many Starry Gems, that could either be because they can't acquire them through selling as easily, or perhaps the black market is going to make it more difficult for people to get Starry Gems, then you may find the immediate impact of that is actually cheaper hero copies. You may find that Aspens become even cheaper, Vulcans become much easier to purchase. You might even find heroes like Natalie, who are famously expensive, become considerably cheaper. That, for people hunting A tiers, is a good thing. And Even though you may find that the price of privately buying Starry Gems increases, you'll probably see the cost of A tiers decrease to match that, which means people who play the game legitimately and don't use the black market to acquire Starry Gems, they'll actually get rewarded for this, and it'll be much easier for them to get copies, which is nice. So I am not against the price of A tiers dropping. I think that could be quite good. So fingers crossed that people are able to get themselves a copy because things get cheaper, and that will be nicer. That's just speculative though, and I can't guarantee that the price of A tiers is going to decrease, but I imagine with less spending power, because there are less Starry Gems, then you'll probably find that demand or ability to purchase things decreases, which forces sellers to try and sell for less to get a sale, assuming they're desperate. And I know I've seen people before try and sell a hero copy, and they just keep decreasing it and decreasing it and decreasing it until it sells. So you might actually get a pretty good deal if the market becomes harder for people to have Starry Gems. Now, I've done a lot of talking about the black market, but I haven't really addressed what it is. The black market is a place where you can buy Starry Gems off of other players using the Starry Gem gifting system. You can get yourself a friend who plays the game and send them money for Starry Gems in return. I absolutely discourage this kind of behavior, and I think it's the prime opportunity to get scammed. There are lots of legal issues with this as well. First of all, it is against terms of service. Secondly, it is very unlikely that the people who do this are using or declaring their money properly for tax purposes. I know that for me, as someone who does this as a job, I would not want to buy from the black market because there's lots of tax implications for doing so, and it's potentially fraudulent behavior. There could be things like money laundering going on. People even go so far as to accept cryptocurrencies for their Starry Gems. It's a very, very shady place and is extremely grey, right? It's called a black market for a reason, and it's not legal, right? Some people would say, well, it's not illegal either, but it's definitely not operating within the terms of service of the game, and it's likely that people are acquiring money for doing this are not operating within the legal systems within which they reside. So, I'd be very surprised if I found a black market Starry Gem dealer who was paying their taxes. Let's just put it that way. Anyway, all of that aside, I have friends who play this game who absolutely purchase the Starry Gems, right, from these people. And they are going to be negatively impacted by this update because the black market, as it currently stands, has shut down trading. There's talks of them increasing the price by over twice as much as they were already charging, and that means people who relied on the black market as a way to get Starry Gems to either buy A tiers or to increase their ability to push events by acquiring more Starry Gems that then turn into contract Starry Gems to, in return, buy value packs. Those people will find themselves in a financially worse off position because they won't get as many Starry Gems for their money. However, when the black market was first set up, I think it was like $75 or $80 for 2,500 Starry Gems. Now it's as low as $20, $15, depending on how many Starry Gems you're purchasing. However, within the community, there's become a small number of people who are considered trusted sellers who have made a lot of money from doing this, and I'm expecting there to be probably an opportunity where there is insider trading and some whale panic, where people are going to be selling very high-end copies of heroes on the auction market to gain Prism Starry Gems, who can then use their conversion rate to convert that all into Starry Gems. And these are likely to be people that already know that the black market is going to increase, who will then be able to make a lot of money off people who are still happy to pay those inflated prices in the black market, and therefore make a lot of money back through that sale. What then will likely happen is the black market will maybe stabilize, DHGames could do some adjustments or whatever, and then you'll find that the black market drops again. And then those people will reacquire Starry Gems and then just buy back the S copies they sold. I think it's relatively unavoidable that that is going to happen, as there are a lot of high-end players who have a very close relationship with the black market. So it's a very weird place. I don't get involved in it, and if I had advice to any spender at all in this game, avoid it. But I'm not going to pretend that I don't know that there are many whales who start, and it's their way of acquiring A-tier heroes. If you see an account with a very low conversion rate but tons of A-tiers, they got those Starry Gems from somewhere. But I've also seen tons and tons and tons and tons of accounts who have lots of A-tiers and S-tiers. They reach level 130, and within no time they quit the game because they burn themselves out. They get bored. They just spend tons of money. And the only person that benefits from that, really, is DHGames for the immediate injection they got, and the black market people who made loads of money off them, selling Starry Gems to them like it was drugs to an addict. Because you've got to remember, people's impulsive behavior to spend lots of money in this game often comes from a position of neurodivergence. You'll find a lot of the people who get addicted and spend hard on this game are a particular kind of player. I know because I am one, right? When I started playing this game, I spent hundreds and hundreds of dollars straight away having zero clue what I was doing. I was a silly donut, and that's why I decided to educate myself, learn, and ultimately now educate you players. The black market becomes an ulterior dimension where those people can spend money and get trapped, and what could have just started off as them wanting to buy an A-tier could quickly end up in a used cars salesman scenario where they're like, well, why don't you buy an S-tier? And why don't you get loads of heroes that you can then use to make them have lots of soul power? And I'll sell you tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Starry Gems to make that possible. And of course, the person with the money goes, well, I guess if that's going to make my account stronger, I should do. And then they get kind of tricked into spending lots of money on Starry Gems. It's not really a trick. It's just good sales tactics at the end of the day. It's within these dealers' interests to make lots of money by selling Starry Gems. But at the same time, it's still a way of being predatory towards whales, especially new whales, and people with money and who want to be strong at this game will take any opportunity to increase the power of their account. That's why gacha games are so successful. I would advise, if you are a early game player and you do want to spend a lot of money on the game, educate yourself first. Don't get sucked in, don't get trapped in, and maybe avoid the black market because it's all sorts of chaotic right now. And I think the prices that people are going to be selling for, I think there's going to be a lot of panic. Let's just put it that way. I don't think the response to this update is going to be very rational initially, and it is probably going to result in some panic selling or panic price increases. Any prediction on the new prices? I've been told it's going to be about 2.5 times the going rate currently in the black market, which is going to be hugely negative for people that rely on it. But what I'm trying to encourage is that you do not need to rely on the black market to have a good time playing this game. Yeah, your experience might be a little bit slower, but just stick to relays, right? There are good events with good spending mechanics that are very, very approachable. Yes, you might struggle to get contract Starry Gems as easily onto your account, but there are other ways of acquiring contract Starry Gems. Relays do give Prism Starry Gems. These events are normally quite accessible. You just won't be able to have quite as many A-tiers, but you only really need like 1 or 2 A-tier heroes to do extremely well. In fact, I think you only need 1, and if you have a second, it's probably a Natalie, right? Just grind it out. Let it happen. You'll be okay. So ultimately, my verdict of this update is probably going to be quite contrary to what a lot of people will have an opinion about. Loads of people don't like this. Loads of people hate this. Loads of people are panicking. I personally think if you have a decent enough credit rating, which you should do if you're actively playing the game, then you're not affected by this. Unless you're doing something a bit weird, like auction house flipping all the time, or you're relying on the black market, whatever it might be, right? But if you're playing this game cleanly, then you're not going to be affected by this at all. On top of that, if you don't have a high conversion rate, just keep playing. Don't worry about this. It's probably not going to affect you anyway. Just increase your Void campaign progress, your Realmscape progress, and eventually you'll find that your conversion rate does increase. As I said, this is a free-to-play account with 3,200. That's crazy big, right? That's massive. And DHGames are actively improving the credit rating system as we speak to make it more reflective of these changes. So hopefully, you folks will find that you aren't actually going to feel this. The people that do feel this are going to be people who either rely on the black market for their spending, or, and I think this is the most important aspect, people who use hero copies as investment opportunities. We're talking people who will buy S-tier heroes, use them on their account, then plan on selling those S tier heroes to get Starry Gems back, which can then be traded to other players. That's fine, but terrible financial advice, straight up. That is a terrible way of dealing with your finances. But I can understand the logic. But if you are able to sell an S tier hero for, let's say, 100,000 Starry Gems, but then you're also hit with the problem of having to convert all those Prism Starry Gems into normal Starry Gems. But let me just remind you that the people that have S tiers and have the position to lock up a hero copy and use it as an investment opportunity also probably have a conversion rating of at least 10,000, so it's only going to take them probably 10, maybe 20 days at most to realize the value of that S tier hero. So they're not really that negatively affected, if we're honest. They're probably just going to sit there thinking, this is a little inconvenient. I wanted to liquidize my Starry Gems a little sooner. Realistically, though, I don't think this is going to cause many problems. The only place that is negatively affected is the black market. And I think anyone who can really look at this objectively will admit the black market is quite a toxic thing for the game to rely on for people to acquire Starry Gems. Like, what kind of game wants their heavy spenders to enter into a dodgy secondary market to be able to play it? It's mad, right? It is crazy. I don't understand, right? And you know what? I've said that, and now I'm thinking, well, I play competitive card games where the secondary market is kind of necessary, but they're actively trading card games. That's the whole point of the game, right? And the people that sell those cards pay their taxes. Idle Heroes, very different. The payment structure is completely otherwise, right? And it's against terms of service to sell assets to other players. It specifically says that in the terms of service, yet people are doing it anyway. And this is just DHGames trying to stop that from happening or make it more difficult. Personally, I would not have done this update. I would not have made it more difficult for people to sell on the auction house. The auction house isn't the problem. It's gifting. I would personally tie gifting to the credit system to cap the amount that a person can gift, which will hurt people who are trying to sell large amounts of Starry Gems. And as well, I would just be more aggressive with banning, to be honest. If people are doing lots of selling and it's obvious on their account, sell it. If you want to be really strict with gifting, make it so you can only gift to guildmates. And then immediately the dealers will expose themselves by being in these guilds where people keep joining, trading Starry Gems and leaving. Ooh, that looks suspicious, right? There's loads of ways that DHGames could go around this without it negatively affecting the consumer of the auction house. But at the same time, all the people that are really affected by this are just users of the black market. And DHGames do not like the black market. So whatever way they skin the cat, if you're relying on the black market to play the game, you have to realize DHGames are at war with the black market, and they are trying to actively make it more difficult or more unattractive for players to use. Are spenders going to quit over this? Maybe. Is it going to reduce the amount people spend on the game? Not in the long term. I think you'll actually find that people will spend more because they're not spending their money on the black market. And you might say, oh, but people will not spend because they remember what it was like. But New Wales never knew what it was like. And I can promise you, gacha games make most of their money from New Wales because New Wales are simultaneously very eager to part with their cash and very silly when it comes to doing so. And people are already quitting. That would make sense, right? People always impulse quit at any update change, though. That does not surprise me. And if people are quitting over this, they probably are people that didn't actually spend that much money on the game anyway. And if they're people that are quitting that have A-tier heroes, you'll see a flood of A-tiers into the market, which will decrease the price, and new players will always rejoin the game. That is just the ebb and flow. You might find those players that quit will also just return anyway. The black market, if that is your relied on way of playing this game, it probably might be time to rethink how you play Idle Heroes. I don't think the black market is a healthy way to approach the game because the black market is always going to be under attack from DHGames. It's dodgy. You could get yourself scammed on there if you don't know what you're doing. And if you want to go with a trusted seller, it is a very monopolized industry where there's a small number of people who make a lot of money because they're the trusted ones. I don't use it, I don't trust it, and I'd encourage you guys not to. But I know most of you aren't going to listen to me anyway. That's the update. Let me know in the comment section what you guys think. I know a lot of you are going to disagree with me. I know a lot of you are going to think that I'm wrong and that this update's terrible. But realistically, for 99.9% of players, I don't think it's going to make a blind bit of difference. And if you want to upgrade your conversion rate, just play the gosh darn game. I'll see you next time. Have a great week. Happy idling.